Thanks everybody for joining us today on today's Agency Masters webinar to hopefully get better briefs. Before we start, just a quick introduction for those who don't know me. I'm Steve. I'm one of the co-founders of the Agency Works. Been working with agencies for over 20 years, and this is a topic that comes up time and time again. So I'm fortunate today, and I've enlisted my colleague Kate to join us, purely because obviously she's very good, but also Kate has worked in a number of agencies before coming to join us here at the Agency Works. So I thought it would be really useful to get some insight from her in terms of how she's found the briefing process from your side, Kate, from an agency side, but also kind of how you dealt with it in terms of speaking to your clients. Mm-hmm. So what we're hoping to do today will be, what we cover today will be useful, and obviously we'll promise to finish in time for you to get a kind of a cuppa before your next meeting. So getting better briefs. As I mentioned, this is such a kind of a big topic. We were thinking about splitting this into kind of multiple webinars. So whether you're writing a brief, whether you're receiving a brief, whether you're briefing your internal team, there are lots of different parts to this process. So hopefully today we can provide some good advice on how we can improve that process. So we all know that marketeers and agencies face pressure when generating ideas that can generate a return on investment. And we know that briefs play a key role in creating impactful and effective work. But unfortunately, though, the quality of the briefs sent from brands to agencies often falls short. And if that happens, receiving a bad brief can lead to confusion, misdirected thinking, and often mediocre ideas. That can then lead to unhappy clients, too many amends, rebriefs, demotivation, and ultimately less effective work, which we agree nobody wants. So it's our job to be reinforcing the need for good briefing. And based on a recent report from the IPA on the best way for a client to brief an agency, which if you haven't read, it's probably worth digging out. 4 in 5 agencies believe that marketers don't understand what they need from briefs. And we know that briefs are one of the most important tools marketers have to create an impactful and effective work. But the quality of briefs that brands send to agencies often leaves much to be desired. And with growing scrutiny on marketing budgets, poor quality briefs are putting brands in danger. So before we continue any further, I think it's best to decide what actually is a brief.
I have to say, I love that cartoon that you had on that last slide there. Yeah, it's very funny. Yeah, so what is a brief? Because, who doesn't love the dictionary definition? But when it comes to what a brief actually is, there are 2 different parts really to note. The physical written brief and the actual briefing itself. And both are really important to get right to get that best creative output. The physical brief is a roadmap, a tool to transfer information from the marketeer's mind to the agencies, whereas the actual briefing process is itself is where the internal agency team discuss the client requirements, the sort of goals, the expectations, and it helps everyone understand the project scope and the objectives.
Cool.
But why does a good brief matter?
Good question.
Well, it defines the problem or the opportunity that the creative work needs to solve, and sort of acts as a compass for creative thinking. A good brief and briefing should guide effective work that delivers better business results. And it highlights what's possible and what's not. How wide is the budget? You might not be able to afford that A-list celebrity that seemed like a really good idea in the brainstorm. And it should provide essential information. It should also keep evaluation of the overwork objective, not a case of who likes what, thinks X is better. So the brief helps avoid subjective thinking.
Cool. So we know that there are 2 parties involved in the process, but who should create the brief? I think it's been established that the clients are pretty bad at creating briefs, often because they don't have the time. And we know that agencies are really good at doing them because often they believe it will help them secure the work. However, it should be the client's job to define their marketing strategy and what they want to achieve. They need to create the initial brief. It's the agency's job to take their strategy and to use your creativity and experience to solve their challenge. So although we're not an agency ourselves, we work in a similar way here. So we can't write briefs for all agencies that potentially would like to use our services or to use Synergist, because each agency has their own issues, challenges. What it is, though, is our job to use our experience to ask questions, to dig deeper, and to offer advice on how best we may be able to help. So I doubt you'll be surprised by this quote from the BetterBriefs UK survey. 73% of agencies don't believe that briefs they receive are good enough. I'm sure it's not unfamiliar feeling or a surprising statistic. How on earth do you work with what you've been sent across? It shouldn't feel like some sort of hidden agenda where you have to guess objectives or what they're trying to achieve from a vague target audience or contradictory messaging. Or they've left options open because you know what to do, or something like last time, but a bit different. Nothing should be left open to interpretation. We need to be asking better questions using clear and simple language with no kind of funny buzzwords or marketing fluff. We need to detail what they need to achieve. So, what actually makes a good brief?
Good question. And again, I liked your cartoon there. You're getting all the good slides today.
Yes, sorry about that.
I've got another statistic for you as well, which is similar to the one that you just quoted there. Was 80% of marketers think that they're good at writing briefs, but only actually 10% of agencies agree. That's another good one. And I think the first sort of thing to think about when we're thinking about what makes a good brief is sort of establishing the why. You know, what problem or opportunity creative work needs to solve. And the why clarifies the need for the work and establishes the expectations for the agency.
I think second one is quite key as well. It's getting the objectives right. So what are the desired outcomes? And I think you can split this down into three different types. You've got the commercial objectives. So this is basically a kind of what effect will the campaign have directly on the client? And this can be measured probably around things like sales or profit or kind of cost savings. The second thing is more behavioral. So this is kind of specifically the change that's needed in people's behavior in order to realize the commercial objectives. So actually, is that kind of like how many people have signed up or downloaded or added more items to baskets or have made healthier choices? And finally, you've got attitudinal objectives. This is the way that the audience needs to think or feel to trigger that desired change in the behavioral outcome side.
Yeah, and then you want to be looking at your target audience. It needs to be specific. Your audience isn't just everyone in Gen Z, for instance, and the audience needs to be sufficient in size to satisfy all the objectives. The brand has to have a valid message really to win them over.
4 plans and deliverables. So actually, this is more around what do we need to produce and how will it be used. There needs to be alignment as well, I think, with also the kind of the bigger picture. An example where you may be the digital agency delivering the web build as part of the campaign, but how does that fit in and tie in with what's being managed by other agencies?
And timings, it's always a good one, isn't it? I think if you ask a client when they need something, they would always say, well, we need it ASAP. Everybody's heard that, haven't they? But a good way to do this would be to kind of like look at seeing when they want to start seeing results and kind of work backwards from there.
And obviously, to make it all work, we need to understand what the budget is. And to do that, we need to justify the return on investment. So like we covered in point 4, it is understanding the overall ROI for the client and the campaign and not just your bit.
And then you've got sort of any other considerations and reference materials that you kind of need to think about. So this might include past work or other insights that you might be able to give, a sort of documentation, or it might just be sort of specifications for the actual work required.
Cool.
So getting the process right. It's the client's job to create the brief, but it isn't just a handover to the agency to go away and deliver. As an agency with your experience and expertise, it's your job to help the client shape the brief and make it as strong as possible. And you're acting as a strategic advisor, not just a supplier. So a good process would be, give the client a template with examples of what is required for each question. Always to ask them to use plain English and avoid jargon. Too many briefs use language that creative people don't understand, so try and keep it objective. And then the client creates the draft brief, and remember, the first draft is never going to be the best brief. Try and get agents involved to review and share ideas before the brief is final. And then it's really time to discuss ballparks as well, before the client should then sort of refine the brief. And then the client is going to be looking at getting any sort of stakeholder sign-off on ballpark figures in particular. And then sort of once that's approved, the briefing is the marketeer's opportunity sort of to be creative and share examples to inspire the agency and sort of kick off that creative process. Once that's all done, that's when it's the agency's turn to shape their response and put their proposal together. Remember, a good briefing provides an opportunity to create a deeper understanding of what is required, and a successful briefing isn't over until the agency says, I get it, I understand what you need for me to deliver.
Absolutely. So we've gone through that side of things. From an agency point of view, then let's look at kind of, once we've got that understanding, kind of how that then moves into kind of shaping the agency proposal.
And I think one of the most important things, and the first one on the slide, is to make sure that you're giving the client your response time, so you're managing their expectations.
I think it's also important as well, when you're looking at your proposal, to involve more team members, get more eyes on this, perhaps people with more experience who can add value. I think it's always important to have kind of more options and a different viewpoint, because that can help you shape your proposal better.
And are you answering the brief? It sounds really simple, but just make sure that you're not kind of giving them pineapples when actually they've just asked for apples and pears.
Absolutely. Number 3, this I'll cover in a second, but the good, the better, the best. This is more about offering a range of choices and perhaps just not one solution. So meeting various needs and also kind of aligning with kind of budgets. So I think in order to do this process effectively, as you mentioned in the previous one, it is absolutely about understanding their needs. It's about highlighting the difference between each option. And then what I found useful is kind of using real life examples to demonstrate how each option perhaps has benefited similar clients. Finally, I would recommend that you make a recommendation, but you make it kind of pretty clear to them that ultimately, the choice of which one they go with is theirs.
And this 5th one that's come up, you may have heard Steve and I talking about estimating in our previous webinar, and if not, then it is available to watch. But this one is all around making sure that you're estimating accurately. So estimating is your internal facing document. Remember, this is where you're estimating what you actually need to deliver a piece of work or a project. And it's very different to the commercial quote. So your commercial quote is what the price that you're giving to your client. So you might value add, or you might give them a discount. And you should always remember that if you're giving them that discount, always remember those 3 F's: the fun, fame, or fortune needs to fall into one of those to enable you to give them a discount.
Number 6, be clear on the sign-off. This is really around kind of managing expectations. You know, if we need to deliver a campaign, say in, I don't know, next Easter, when do we need sign-off? When are the start dates? These dates also need to be documented and agreed up front, and not just kind of agreed verbally. They need to be part of the proposal. That's really quite important as well.
Absolutely. Got a bit trigger happy there, Steve.
Yep.
Okay, so number 7, have you defined your scope? Have you made any assumptions? Definitely don't want to be making any of them. Are we aligned with the capabilities, the accountabilities? We're all capable. Well, maybe. Are we aligned with all the accountabilities? You know, who's doing what? And are there any exclusions? Or is there anything that you've left out?
And also, this kind of ties in with what we've mentioned in point 2 in terms of involving other members of the team. I think it's this kind of whole idea about strength testing, that, you know, running it past the management team, you know, subjecting your plans to evaluation and identifying, if you can do, any kind of weaknesses. But I think it allows you to kind of gain insight, and it allows you to strengthen your position, and then hopefully foresee any potential kind of obstacles that might come up. So getting more people involved is really good as well.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree. And that last one sounds so simple, but not necessarily the case. Very tempting, possibly, after you've worked very hard on a presentation, just to pop it over on an email. But don't, you know, resist that. Make sure you present it to the client. That enables you to make sure that you're pointing out all the bits on that presentation that you've worked very hard on. And it gives the client sort of Q&A time, and actually to agree sort of the next steps there and then.
100%. That's something that we do ourselves, and that's really important. Not just sending stuff across, but being able to kind of talk people through it. It's really useful. Okay, so now we've kind of got covered the part where we've had the agency client workflow piece, where we've refined the brief, we've hopefully instructed them how, and we've dig deeper to get kind of better understanding of what's required. We've not made any assumptions. We're now at the part where we're looking to brief this in to our creative team. From your experience, Kate, what would you say is the best way, or the best kind of tips that you would give to managing that process?
Well, I think the internal brief in the brief and the briefing is where you can use the brief itself sort of as an ideas springboard, and where you can add sort of more depth to the audience's understanding by sort of immersing your team in the audience's life and offering, but also by adding more market insights. And sharing inspiration so that they can kind of level up their thinking as well. It's good to remember that brands use agencies to come up with ideas that they can't think of themselves. You know, this is where agencies really do add value. And it's the agency's job to take this strategy and use creative and the media smarts to achieve the defined goals in the most effective way possible.
Cool, thanks for that. So in terms of what we've covered, if I was to look at kind of 3 top takeaways from the things that we've been through, this is something that Kate mentioned before. I think kind of being a strategic advisor as opposed to a supplier is really quite key. Somebody who actively participates in discussions. You know, you're offering insights, you're offering suggestions, recommendations. This goes beyond the kind of transactional nature of a supplier-client relationship. You are actively engaged with the client, you're offering strategic insight, and then hopefully that will aim to kind of build up a kind of a longer-term value with the client. Ask 5 ways. It was mentioned on the previous slide. This is a technique. It's a really kind of powerful tool to use. It's allowing us to kind of understand and uncover, should I say, the root cause of the problems. Often when a client comes to you with their requirements, is, you know, it's kind of surface level. What we need to do is ask why 5 times, is dig deeper. So when we're briefing the project, it can help us uncover like underlying issues, motivations, goals. So often I see things like, why are we starting this project? Why is this project important to the client? Why do we need to achieve these specific goals? Or why do we believe these strategies or methods would be effective? So the more we can dig down, I think the more you uncover what their actual problem is, which will then help you brief the team internally and hopefully kind of present a better solution. The final one I touched on before: the good, the best, the good, the better, and the best options. So this is the approach that we talked about that gives the client a range of options. So it allows them to select different options which would hopefully best fit their requirements and their budget. So this can provide more flexibility and provide more choice that allows them to kind of fit their requirements. Right, so we said we'd give you a chance to grab a cuppa before your next call. That's been kind of 20 minutes, so it gives you a nice kind of few minutes to kind of jump off and get yourself a refreshment before your next session. Just want to take time to thank you for joining us. I want to thank Kate as well for joining us on today's session and give us some useful insight in terms of her time working at within agencies and dealing with the briefing process. We will be sending out a copy of the recording to you all for those who haven't been able to attend live, or perhaps for those who want to share with their team members. If you did enjoy this webinar and you want to join another one, then the next one we will be doing, if you keep your eyes peeled, will be on revenue management, revenue recognition. Very exciting within agencies, very important, but very exciting, which will be hopefully delivering possibly this side of Christmas, possibly in the new year. But if you have any questions on today's session, then please do get in touch or connect with us on LinkedIn. And if not, then thanks for joining and have a great day.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.